Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hi, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, and I'm host of Talk Cosmos, this weekly astrological conversations, leading edge conversations with wonderful astrologers. And this week has a special guest. Once in a while during the month, there is room away from our three panels. It is July 4th. It is the United States birthday of declaring the fact that we're independent. And of course, that's a big question. Independent for what? Why? How? Well, we are going to further. Oh, yes, there we go. Hear the fireworks exclaim. Excitement. It's always wonderful to be authentic, to be true to yourself. And the title today is the Lunation Cycle. Cancer, the moon that, the sun that the sign that the sun is traveling or visiting, you might say, is in Cancer, and that is ruled by the moon. Great partnership up there in the sky. So it's the Lunation Cycle, Sabian Symbols and Numerology, if I could talk correctly, numerological patterns, numbers. The universe is vibrational and it's all about numbers. So with this perspective, which will be spoken better than I here tonight, we will synthesize later at the half hour the United States solar return, because every year, regardless if you're a person or a country or a business, the sun returns and there's a message in that connection with the sky at that moment, relating back to the natal birth of that moment. So Sabian symbols, what are they? They're images and metaphors. They describe the degrees, each of the 360 individual degrees of the zodiac. And this understanding provides life lessons and material that are revealing to the journey of self-realization. And they're based on spiritual guidance. They were first derived in 1925 clairvoyantly by Elsie Wheeler, and then Marc Edmund Jones, an older astrologer, a great astrologer, interpreted them. And later, Dane Rudhyar, who's a humanistic astrologer and author who pioneered modern transpersonal astrology and very much a touchstone, keystone master of astrology for these days, created a whole outline of this journey towards self-realization. So with this brief introduction of that, let me introduce my wonderful speaker tonight and today, and that is Justin Crockett Elzie. And by the way, you'll notice that his name has two T's, not just one. And you can find Justin on Facebook, and we'll give his email. Justin's an archetypal astrologer. He provides in-depth transformational astrology, numerology consultations when he analyzes natal, progressed, and lunar return charts. And Justin works with the Sabian symbols to maximize potential on that soul's journey, each one we have, to live our authentic self. And he answers remarkably any question you might have. He's totally a very astute, kind, caring astrologer. Justin's a spiritualist medium, also focusing on communicating with spirits to relay messages across realities from their loved ones who have moved to the other side. And he sees this as part of his life purpose, that service to spirit, to heal relationships. Justin Elzie does individual mediumship readings, conducts seances. He's a certified meditation teacher and a certified Reiki practitioner, and specializes in animal Reiki. I love the animals. It's like anybody that loves the animals, I love. Okay, so Justin is located in the Northwest near Seattle, And if go to Talk Cosmos, and you can find it's under Justin Elzie on Facebook. Hi, Justin. I'm so glad
Oh,
to have you.
thank you so much for that introduction, Sue. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. How are you
Yes,
doing today?
I'm doing fine. Yeah, it's a complete one, and it's good. I know we've talked about this, and what a great celebration. It works really well having it on the 4th. And um, I think you were going to introduce your own astrology, if I'm correct. And then I have a
Yes, yes.
question.
Yes. So for those astrologers who are listening who may be curious about my astrology, I am a Cancer. I'm a sun sign Cancer, and my moon is in Virgo, along with Pluto in Virgo. So I do in-depth analysis. I like to get down into details, and my ascendant is Gemini. So, and I have Jupiter. I have Jupiter in Pisces in the 10th house, and I'm currently, and my Saturn is in Aquarius, conjunct my South Node in my 9th house. So I'm currently going through my second Saturn return, my Jupiter return, and my Mars return this year.
Voila. And I know that you have a course that we'll talk about later at the half hour. So that's really going to be a great impetus. Let me ask you here, how about numerology and astrology? What is that relationship?
Well, let me first say that in my in-depth studies of astrology, and I was first doing numerology first, then I got into astrology because I realized they're actually the same science. And in Vedic astrology, numerology is huge. In Vedic astrology, they assign numbers to the planets, and in Western astrology, I think it's a blind spot. I think it's been sort of separated out, and astrologers don't really pay attention to the numbers versus just a one-dimensional way. Yeah, it just tells me what deacon or term that where the planet's at in the chart. But Dane Rudhyar, one of my favorite astrologers and who I read so much about, Dane Rudhyar said the ultimate secret or mystery to astrology is the numbers, because we know it's all mathematics. So there is a really strong connection, and if an astrologer really understands sort of the measurement, because numbers measure vibration, frequency, and sound. Numbers are a measurement or definition tool. And I think in Vedic astrology, they recognize this solely, and they really use the numbers. And I think if Western astrologers got more into it, it would help with where we need to rectify charts. And it's a really a tool that brings in another new depth and analysis within astrology.
I like this, particularly because I know in astrology, we look at double features or double signatures, or however we express that, replicated. And especially if we see it 3 times, then we know, yes, this is a real message. It's just presented in different ways. So the numbers have meaning more than just counting how many beans in this pile versus tomatoes in that pile.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if I may, I just want to kind of give sort of people a couple examples here for an astrologer's point of view, how numbers can give you some insight into things. So, for example, just really quickly, the meaning or somewhat of a archetypal meaning of the 9 numbers. The number 1 is usually associated with sun, but it's very Aries like. So if a person's born on a 1 day, they'll tend to be more of an individual. There's a very more of an Aries or Capricornian or Sun type of Aries, Mars, Sun type of personality. So 1 represents individuality and independence. 2 is associated with the moon, and it's about relationship and balance and harmony. It's a very Aquarian, Libra-like number. And so when you see this a lot in, for example, if a person's born on a 29 day, for example, 9 kind of represents the group structure, a very Neptunian number. This is a person that's very aware of all the relationships in the group. So it kind of tells you they have a lot of very strong Libra, Aquarian tendencies. And they've got something in those signs. Number 3 is the magical child. It's associated with Jupiter, which rules Pisces. And so we see this as a very creative, emotional, compassionate number, and it rules the third house of communications and emotions. And so, for example, I'll give you something that's one of these definites. When a person is a life path of a 30 or born on a 30 day, 30, strong, creative. It's the archetype of the artist. Life paths of fours, the four number is about foundation and structure, and geometry is a square. So this is a very Capricornian, again, Aries type of energy. Cancer as well, because Cancer rules the fourth house. So, but it's a little bit around authority and structure. And so fours tend to be very grounded, very like cosmic order. So there's something that's kind of Virgo or Capricornian like with that energy. Fives, associated with the planet Mercury in Vedic astrology, it's the Gemini. It's about diversity of experience in life. And sixes is related to Venus in Vedic astrology, and so it's the sixth house in the chart. So there's some things around earth and resources here, and also work and health. And so there's a need of being responsible of service is really the sixth energy. Seven, number of spirituality. It's the number out of time. It's in all traditions, 7 directions in Native American spirituality, 7 loaves in the Bible. It's a very inward turn, moon-like number, serious, associated with the moon in Vedic astrology, but also kind of Virgo-like, very quiet, serious, and analytical. Sevens, it's all about how much they know. They're very intelligent, and they tend to analyze, like they analyze their world. Sort of that Virgo analyze their inner and outer world. Eights, number of manifestation. Eight's the number of money in Chinese astrology. It's associated with Saturn. And also the Leo card in the Tarot. So it's sort of about manifesting, and it's sort of almost the end of the numbers. It's about harvesting and manifesting. And I guarantee you 100% of the time I've seen this in charts and numerology, when a person's born on an 8-day, they will at some point in their life have their own business. 100% of the time I've seen it consistently, or they'll want to pay themselves in their life. And so this also has some relationship to the 2nd to 8th houses about resources and worth and material worth and manifesting that. And the last number, which is the 9, it's kind of a Neptunian number. Of course, Vedic astrology doesn't look at Neptune or the Pluto, those outer planets, or Uranus, but 9 has a very Virgo Neptunian energy to it. The 9 in the Tarot is the Hermit. So 9s there's an aspect of 9 liking to be alone. They see the bigger picture in the room, and it's around completion. So that's sort of how that plays out. But it's really, if you look at a person, you don't have their chart, and you look at their numerology, you're like, wow, you can start to see numerical patterns really when you start to get in depth of it, and you can already see astrology without even looking at the chart, just looking at the birthday numbers.
I really appreciate that. I am interested in numbers, and this is a good basis. Yeah. So, and if more could be said, great. If with this relationship then to the lunar cycles and the phases and this pattern, I suppose maybe that's the next step to
yes
consider.
So I that Virgo analytical, I was getting down into it, and I was analyzing, because every year I like to do people what's called a personal year cycle. And this is something else that I found it's amazing. When we look at the lunar nodes, start there. The lunar nodes are an 18-year cycle, but a half nodal return is 9 years, half of that, right? And what happens is that when people go through a half nodal return or full nodal return, they have some dynamic change in their life, or they will have change. Guarantee you 100%. Half nodal returns and nodal returns. Well, in numerology, there's what's called this 9-year cycle. And it's a birthday, a 9-year cycle. 1 year is a year of beginnings, and in 9 years, a year of completion and endings. And so this is how you get a personal year in numerology. You add the month and the day, and you add it to the current year. So this is how we get the person's what personal year they're in. So I was doing charts, and I thought, I wonder for every new moon and full moon this year, what personal numerological day a person was on, because you can also break the numerology down to specifically to numerological days. And so, for example, I had this client, and they were in a 5-year. So then I looked at the month of January, and I'm like, okay, what's the new moon in their personal day? And lo and behold, I started to find out that the person was on the same numerological day for every new moon in the first part of the year. And then there was sort of this slight adjustment in the middle of the year. And then they were on the same numerological day for every full or new moon there on out. And then the full moons was the same thing. So there seems to be, so I was like, wow, there's a pattern here that's very important. That there's a theme every new moon and full moon in a person's life, what house that's happening in. And if we understand the numbers in the numerology, it kind of tells you what they're going through with this new moon and how it's affecting them. So I saw sort of in the beginning of the year, there's a pattern, then it kind of morphs around June or July, and then there's a strict pattern for the second part of the year. So it's and as we know the importance of the moon, it affects our lives daily. As you think about it, every month the moon conjuncts every planet. And so it affects our emotions, it affects how we feel, it affects the Earth's magnetic field. So our body has electromagnetic field, so it affects our emotions scientifically, it affects women's cycles, men have cycles. So yeah, I found this amazing lunation pattern. And so I do a chart now for people where they're in a personal year, and then I list all the new moons and full moons of the year and what house it's showing up for them, and then what's the numerological pattern for the year. So there's a numerological pattern. And I'm going to include this in a book that I'm writing about lunation cycle and patterns.
This is going to be exciting. And I'm thinking too, because we know that, I'm just remembering when you talk about lunation cycles for the audience, because many are astrologers, but for those that aren't, we know that there's the new moon that we can't see. There's a full moon that, hey, it's shining everywhere. It's big and fat and making it bright. And then, of course, there's a quarter moon, but there are these either 8 or 12 cycles, and that we relate that cycle to all the other planets, of like beginning, growth, seeding, bursting, fulfillment, and then releasing and going back down. So, but I'm thinking when you said it was June, July, that's right around the solstice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's a solstice event too, which I love to see life related to this. It's so basic to our whole nature, light, how much light, whether
yeah, exactly. When the Earth goes as far as it goes, and then it starts to come back. So you're so right. That change I see in the lunation cycle with the numerology, that's when it reaches its pinnacle and it starts to come back. And then there's a pattern on the downside.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think with Sabian symbols, which, as an astrologer, I have a couple of books on it, and you look at it, but it is quite a study. I mean, it takes insightful knowledge as yourself. So but just researching a little bit, I noticed that I think it was Dane Rudhyar that also was noticing the same essence, and Tisha and all that, which is another whole astrological, which gets a lot of people confused. So, but between ourselves, but for those that aren't, but the fact is that this going from one solstice to the next, and then as it replicates back, but there's something about Sabian symbols too. Or without all that, which might be more for some other conversation, what can you say about Sabian symbols? That's what maybe I need to know.
Well, yeah, I don't look at the Edmund Jones writings on it. I follow Dane Rudhyar. I love Dane Rudhyar. Transpersonal psycho, as a philosopher and astrologer, and you're right. I think what we're really looking at, it's all cycles. We look at the returns, we look at everything else. It's all cycles. And one of the great things about the Sabian symbols is that you start to see it's really sort of this discussion about individuality versus the collective. And all the lessons that we're going through with all of that, me versus the collective, and psychologically working through all aspects of the personality. And ultimately, and one of the great things I like about the Sabian symbol, especially the ones, the 30 degrees of Virgo. The last 30 degrees of Virgo is what's called the conquest of illusion. And that's a great example of how that's what Dane Rudhyar called that last 30 degrees. And that really kind of speaks to the whole aspect of Virgo, which is, just pointing out one sign, is that it's about analysis and going deep and trying to find the truth. And ultimately they find that's what they're trying to do all along, is conquesting that illusion, which in the opposite end of the chart, the Pisces is putting out, you know? So I think there's a real, speaking about the Sabian symbols, there's also a predictive thing here. And sometimes amazingly, and I know some other astrologers here in the Northwest, we were looking at this when we looked at the coming year, we start to look at the Sabian symbols, and sometimes they can be very literal. And so, for example, last year during the election year, one of the moons, right around the time of the right around June to July, August timeframe, one of the Sabian symbols for the moon was the Indian woman or indigenous woman introduces her white male lover to the tribe. And I thought, wow, it really, and it was actually right around the time that Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris. And it really was like amazing. And you start to get into the Sabian symbols, and they quite literally explain people's emotions at that particular time in the collective. There was something else I want to say about the study of Sabian symbols, which I sometimes see as a blind spot with astrologers doing this, is people tend to round up. So let's say the Sabian symbol is 28.02 degrees. Everybody goes to 29 degrees and they ignore the 28 degrees, even though it literally says 28.02. And I think what astrologers got to have is read the 28 degrees, because that's what you're bringing into the energy, and then read the 29 degrees because that's what it's moving toward. But then if the planet's retrograding, go backwards. Look at the degree of the planet at 29.07, and then read the 28 degrees, because that's what it's moving back towards. So a lot of times astrologers, too often just round up. And I think they're missing part of the story. I just want to put that in as far as the study of the Sabian symbol.
That's very special. Particularly, interestingly, from my knowledge, I have 29 degrees Virgo rising. So it's like, hello, thank you. Meaning on my descendant, it would be 30 degree or 29 Pisces. But then that is the curious part, because rounding off, if you learn it in math, they say, well, if it's before 50, because it's degrees, it's actually 30 degrees. So then you wonder, okay, is it really this? Which direction is it going? So do you think that makes a real significance, or just generally speaking? Go ahead.
I think generally speaking, not to, and this is the Virgo in me getting really down deep in detail.
Yeah. And me too. It's like, okay, let's look.
But I think it's important to understand from a broad brushstroke that if it says 28 some degrees, don't ignore the 28. Don't jump to the 29 when you're doing. Look at the 28, because a lot of times it applies because it's where they're at now.
Yep.
And what it's moving towards with the 29s.
This is so great, because if we're looking at cycles, and that's what we're relating to, and we're looking at the moon, which, as we say, is the closest planetary object there. We call it anyway, because it turns so quickly, it goes through every 2.5 days, a whole sign. In other words, nothing is static. It gets back to this whole idea, Einstein, energy is always changing, because we tend to think, oops, there it is. There's our table. There's our doorway. Forgetting that we go from one room to the next, or we put things on the table. It's just like static, and we're also, it reminds me, we're just really leaving that 200 years cycle of earth-based consciousness, materialism, of how to even negotiate with each other, whether we are or aren't. And it's just like we can reframe how to connect our whole consciousness through this, like you say, a little before, a little during, and where's it going? This whole movement.
Yeah, yeah. You have to know where you're presently at and what you're bringing into the situation, and then what you're moving towards. The broader picture there. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, which Sabian books? We have a couple of minutes before. Well, Dane Rudhyar. I think a friend
Right.
is bequeathing me, which I'm going to pay her some for the Mandala book, which you can hardly find. It's like I'm so excited, really excited, because I do have Edmund Jones, standard one that
Right.
familiar. But there's so many of these Sabian books.
I would highly encourage people to check out. There's now a repository for Dane Rudhyar stuff online. I think it's called Kahaldi or Kaldi. I'll look it up really quickly and give it to you. But it's a repository, and so you can look at a lot of Dane Rudhyar's books and interviews free. There's all these PDFs of a lot of his books. One of my favorite, of course, is the Astrology of Personality.
Yes.
So because I'm interested in human personality and behavior, and so I love his. But there is a website that a lot of scholars use now and astrologers use. That it's a repository of like books that are out of print and a lot of PDFs and a lot of good stuff.
Dane Rudhyar, he's a touchstone master and that. But so because I don't think, back to the Sabian symbols, I don't think many people can get his mandala book. That's what I was referring to. But if they want to know how to look at Sabian symbols as a focus, just before we depart here, there's online about his approach of Sabian
Yes,
symbols.
there is. Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would also say, not to put in a plug for anybody, but there is an astrologer here in the Pacific Northwest that knew Dane Rudhyar personally. And I'm planning on interviewing him. He's got so many great stories about the day that Dane Rudhyar was sick and he went over to see him. And that astrologer here in the Pacific Northwest is Ray Couture. He was a student and friend of Dane Rudhyar, and he's got so many great stories of just that personal relationship and how Dane Rudhyar thought. And so you should interview him sometime, Ray Couture. You know him, of course, but he's got so many great...
I only met him briefly through, and I appreciate this. This is good closing until we meet again after the half hour here. On with the East-West Book Astrologers, which are one of the bookstores that you have frequented, and that was back in January 30th, and Ray was on there, and that's COUR, but okay, TURE, I think, but
yes,
okay, but when you interview him, how is that? Like, if a person goes,
I don't know, how
are we gonna find?
I don't know.
Okay, people can connect.
Yeah. But I just wanted
very good.
He's an amazing guy because he has so many personal anecdotes of knowing Dane Rudhyar personally.
Extraordinary. Yeah, that's very important to get that link. Okay, folks, we are 4th of July celebrating. I'm with Justin Crockett Elzie, and that's 2 T's, not 1. And this will be back talking about the USA and what messages we might get. Okay, thank you.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. Currently, we are in the period of Cancer. By leaving a cycle based on connecting mental communication to the external, the energy of Cancer involves emotions, which create our personal story through our emotional associations and attachments. As a cardinal water sign that is nurturing, Cancer needs to process emotions in one's own internal rhythm of cycles in order to complete an evolution.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Todd. Please join me for an 8-week online course in personal mythology. In this course, we will explore some of the myths, the stories that shape who we are and how we walk through the world. Contrary to popular belief, a myth is not a falsehood, but rather a story that holds universal and collective truths. They are the stories woven through time, tethering us to our known ancestors and beyond. Using experiential exercises and reflective writing assignments, in this course you will come to know yourself in a new way. When you understand the story you are living, you can more consciously direct the narrative of your life. This class will be taught in an online platform, as well as over 3 Zoom calls. Class starts July 19th. For more information or to register, please go to my website, mythicsky.com.
Talk Cosmos brings.
Hi, this is Willie Bodrak, a retired expat from Seattle, now living in Mexico. You're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we understand how to implement our free will through the cosmos.
Easy on the ears, good for the soul. Alternative Talk 1150.
Oh my goodness. I have to be grateful in this life. Hi, Justin.
Hi,
This
Sue.
is very wonderful. So I'm with Justin Crockett Elzie. Well, there's 2 ways to get a hold of Justin. One is his name, and you can always go to Talk Cosmos on the bio and 4th season, and Justin is there. I think he was 3rd season too, so twice. And it's Justin.Elzie. That's ELZIE, right?
Right, at Gmail,
Okay,
yes.
at Gmail, and also on Facebook. So we are talking about the 4th of July with numbers and astrology, Sabian symbols. We'll be talking about the U.S. chart, the return chart that we're all part of in this nation, and how we might think about it. But I know that you have a class coming up, and we will be presenting that online for people to hear. But maybe would you tell us a little about it? Like, it's 4
Yes,
months
I'm
starting in.
sure. At the beginning of the new moon, of course, I got to do it with the new moon cycle. So, beginning of new moon in September, I'm going to be doing a 4-month to the end of the year, a 4-month in-depth astrology course, and we'll be looking at, starting out, of course, with the basics, but covering signs, planets, houses, aspects, and studying the lunar nodes, and then of course spending a lot of time with chart interpretation. So I'm really excited. It's going to be a really in-depth course. So it's no fluffy thing here, and it's going to be really in-depth and insightful.
And intimate, I bet. You have a few people
Yes.
be on Zoom. That's
Yeah,
very
it's not going to
special.
it's not going to be a large class. So this is built more towards a lot of on helping people personally, and doing a lot of coaching work, and looking at different charts and bringing in charts they want to look at, and helping them with analysis.
Oh, that's extraordinary, because a lot of times one needs that feedback. But I happen to know that that's September 6th, because the new moon, I think, the new moon is September 6th, as it is. So people, that'll be what a gift. And for aspects too, not just where are the nuts and bolts and how do they look, but actually apply them, and get some feedback, because that's the whole study after a while, but
Right.
it takes time. So I know you'll be a wonderful
Thank you.
teacher. So this is great. Shall I pull up the chart then for the USA? Did you want to see just
solar return?
Did you want to see the bi-will, or did you just want to see, because I can put it on later, or just put the solar return itself?
Can we just do the solar return one? The solar return.
Okay, got it. Then I will do this in a moment. Yeah, and you can, at least I think I will. Oh, I see what happened. It'll take me a moment, so maybe you want to.
No
You
problem.
can explain. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, I think it's important to those people who are just learning astrology that what the solar return chart is where the sun at this point goes back to the same degrees this year as the natal chart in the United States. And of course, I particularly, and a lot of astrologers, like the Sibley chart, because it did come out 12 years in 1787 after the end of the revolution in the United States. And so Sibley was he lived in the UK, and he was very intimate, or not intimate, but he knew people in the colonies. And so the Sibley chart is based on firsthand experience. And so I like it, you know, and I mean, when people 200 years later come back and try to rework it, I kind of like to go back to the original source. And I think he's probably the best source. And so I like that. You know, the Sibley chart, of course, the United States chart has an ascendant of Sag. And we're a Cancerian nation. And the moon is, of course, in Aquarius.
Can you see that now, Justin? The chart, did it show?
Yeah, there it is. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And also to mention, not everybody is on YouTube. We still have our podcast audience, which I'm very grateful for, and I'm
Right.
just glad that we're reaching to people and hoping to hear more from these people. But yes, so here we are. Go ahead.
Do you want me to kind of give you my thoughts on this? Is that what you want me to do?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And with Sabian symbols, in a way, I guess what I'm thinking is, because obviously the sun is going to stay at its 13 Cancer at 19 minutes, but from a Sabian symbol viewpoint or numerology viewpoint, however you want to look at this,
We look at it
any which way.
13 and 14 degrees. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
want to just say, as we step back first, before you kind of look at this and we look at chart interpretation, there are some themes that show up here. We all know that before we jump into this, that we just came out of a big pandemic. That's kind of a restructuring in our society, right? You know, Pluto in Capricorn, tearing up that structure and that authority and foundation. And so what I've noticed in my own clients, and I know other astrologers have noticed, that people are now kind of stepping that foot back into the water. How do I feel about that? And, you know, what we see in this USA solar return chart is where that's reflected. And so thinking about that.
And I think, and Justin, you broke away for a moment, and I'm sure you're talking about the Pluto return. Is that what you're talking about? It must be, because your voice broke up for a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I said so.
That's okay.
What I said, we just went through a pandemic, and it kind
gotcha.
of warped the structure
Okay,
of
yes.
our lives.
Thank you.
And now this collective, we're all trying to come out of this
Yes.
timeout.
Okay.
We all coming out of this
Yep.
timeout, and we're all trying to figure out, where do we go from here, right, after this
Okay.
big change. And you
Absolutely.
actually see that reflected, that kind of stepping our toe back into the water within the Sabian symbols, starting with this ascendant in Aquarius at 27 to 28 degrees. So we look at the 27, we look at the 28, and it really talks about, in the Sabian symbols, this car battery, and kind of checking out how as things are, and I need to check out my world. And then there's also sort of this kind of having this intelligent foresight into what's going on, trying to get back into the collective. It's an individual mental thing because in an Aquarius, an air sign. And so I think we lost.
Is that the natal? Yeah, but that's the natal chart that you were talking about? Or
No,
27?
the solar return.
Where is,
US
okay,
solar
because
return.
where, yeah, okay. I'm so sorry here. Okay. And the 27 degree, because the ascendant's 29. Where's the Aquarius that you were talking about? I just got lost. Pardon me?
Actually, it should be about 27 degrees.
Okay, then mine is wrong. Well, let me recalculate this then and make sure 10 degrees. Because, you know, being in Hawaii, I get it to...
So while you're doing that,
that's
let
the
me kind of
problem.
talk to that so we don't miss any time here. So
Gotcha.
one of the things we're dealing with, the later degrees of Aquarius here, is where it talks about in the Sabian symbols how there's sort of this testing of the waters, testing of the car battery, exactly, and trying to have some, you know, the trees sawed for winter and what's coming up. So there is sort of this mental air-like energy around where people are trying to think about, where do I go from here? And I should also point out that this that degree, that 27 degrees Aquarius, is also the same degree as the moon. The Earth, the USA's natal moon is 27 degrees. And so there's some connection there because US moon is 27 degrees Aquarius, and the Sabian symbol at that time talks about sort of this, what happens now, and I need to kind of think intelligently and have some insight into what's coming up. Now, the second thing that jumps out at me here, is the moon. We always look, and when we look at solar return charts, we look at the sun and the moon, but I want to jump to the moon here as well. The moon is in Taurus, and it's interesting that in the USA return chart that the
You're
if
breaking
you
up a little bit. You're just breaking up.
in
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I have done the chart with AstroDensed, and so it's at 10:53 p.m. and at 10:53 p.m., which is at 27 degrees the Aquarius, by the way. And so then the Uranus is right inside Taurus in the second house. And as we know, this Uranus is the planet of unusualness and change. This is where we see new currencies coming out, cryptocurrencies. It's in the second house of values. But that moon is conjunct Uranus and Taurus in our USA solar return chart. So there, Taurus moon is about emotional security, and I've got all my resources, and so emotions is tied to our security. And the Sabian symbol specifically talks about that 18 degree to 19 degree moon specifically talks about the inadequacy of past knowledge in times of crisis, meaning how we did it in the past ain't going to work towards going to the future. So this is one of these times where I'm talking about how quite literally the Sabian symbol will speak to how we emotionally feel at this particular point in time. That's why I hope everybody listening today check out the Sabian symbols. They will blow you away, and how it's talking about. And of course, then the 19 degrees talks about refusing the past and facing issues head on. And so this is what you see happening in the collective right now. Look at all the stories coming out that people don't want to go back to that low paying job in a cubicle in a big high rise. People are like, wait a second, the way we've done it in the past is wrong. And because of course Taurus rules the second house of resources and money and how we get paid in our lives, second to eighth house, this is the time when people are this is a great time to start your own business. This is a great time to think differently about money, think differently about what's valuable. And you see that happening in the collective. So this is very important in the USA solar return chart, that Taurus moon conjunct Uranus. You're going to continue to see this upheaval and change in work and how we value work and money and our use of resources. And of course, we're going to, cryptocurrencies are going to continue on and become even more prominent at this particular point in time. So that's what it's really quite interesting. The Sabian symbols quite literally speak to, with that moon and that ascendant, people trying to step their toe back into the water, and that moon being about, wait a second, way I got paid in the past, screw this low paying job. Let me do something differently. It's about that emotional and resource security going on. Then the third thing I want to point out to people in this chart is the Jupiter in Pisces, and it's conjunct the ascendant there, and it's going retrograde. So we know Jupiter in Pisces going retrograde is sort of this kind of this reality kind of hitting us in the face of what we thought was really good, but now it's it's sort of a dose of reality happening there, right? But the Sabian symbol with Jupiter, the great benefactor, and how we grow and expand is the Sabian symbol actually talks about commerce and about the marketplace and how we need to kind of squirrel away our savings and kind of get out there in the collective. So what I see coming out of this is people step their toes back into the water and they reevaluate work. At the same time, there's going to be a large focus on the economy. And we see that happening. That will be really a large focus is on the economy. Yeah, that's what I would say there. I don't want to keep droning on unless you had something to say, Sue.
I value this. And first, for our audience, for the visual ones, I apologize, because depending, maybe not Porphyry, maybe it was Placidus. Somehow my ascendant is not correct. So, but so I want to make that clarification.
Oh yeah, I
because it is
apologize. On mine,
fascinating.
I
No, it's
use
okay, because
Placidus.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we didn't, that was a detail, and I could. So it's fascinating that here we are with a sun in natally in Cancer of home, personal, a family, our own stories, protection, all the wonderful elements of that, and emotional stories. And our moon that rules that Cancer sun is right. Our emotional ways, our perspectives are exactly how we're going to enter into our arena of ourself and our life, and collectively it's the public too,
Right.
in
Right.
large astrology. So that's just fascinating to
Can I
align
mention,
with. Go ahead.
can I
Mhm.
mention one other theme that I think is kind of important since today's July 4th is, and I'm going to go to the sun now, the Cancer, and it's trined Neptune that in Pisces. So something to think about here. And I like to call this the astrology of patriotism, right? The country is a family, right? We're a Cancer nation, and the country is a family. And we know that with Neptune, Neptune's not in Cancer right now, but when Neptune is in Cancer, the more negative aspect can be a mandolin, sort of this really emotional attachment to a family. And so I think that's somewhat of also a sub theme that's going on here. And, those people that feel a need to be attached to a family. And so it's something to pay attention to about emotional attachments. There's some people are so involved with being so overly patriotic that we see that with that kind of that Neptune trined with the sun, and sort of that needing to be a part of the family. So there is a sub psychological theme here around emotional attachments and boundaries with family members, because we know there's going to be a large focus on family this year. Everybody wants to get back to the family, see the grandparents, but there is something here about, we should evaluate that, and that Neptune, Sun, Cancer, uh, uh, Pisces connection there, and make sure that it's healthy. Make sure it's healthy. That emotional attachment to the nation, the family, is healthy. And I think that what we saw in the pandemic, a lot of people had that, and then when it kind of, the democracy is being torn down, it blows people's world because they're so emotionally involved in the patriotical family of the nation that it kind of upset their world. So there's something about in the chart here, an underlying theme of emotional attachments and family, and how we see family with that. And I just want to point out that that's an underlying
Excellent.
theme.
I love it. I love this, because attachment is everything for Cancer emotions. It's the stories that we have told ourselves, and who is our family. This transit right now for the coming year that's on our minds, with that moon energy of our attachments and families, insecurity, survival oriented Taurus, conjunct this upsetting, revolutionizing energy of of Uranus. It says, really, who is our true family? Because when it reminds me that when we connected back then, a year and a half ago, with this pandemic, approximately, it was like, yeah, we knew who our family was, and it was like reconnecting with them, like, oh yeah, I'm getting to know you again. I've been a little away, and blah blah blah. And then now, with all these mutable things happening, and talking about the nodes too, that are
Oh
Gemini
yeah.
ascendant.
Oh, that's another
So
whole
that,
story.
yeah, I know. But what I'm getting at is that, in a sense, we're redefining our stories and our past and our traditions, and letting go of our old beliefs, and trying to incorporate what is truly what we are emotionally attached to. It's tricky times.
You're spot on, because the Sabian symbols talk about the development of character. And that's
Ooh.
really what there you go. And that's what you were going around that head of the pin there. It's about the development of the character of the nation. And one other thing I forgot to point out, that the sun, if we are looking at the solar return, and the sun is in the 5th house, the sign of children, the 5th house, which is children and creativity. And so I do think there's going to continue to be a focus on the whole border and children thing. That's going to continue to be a theme for us in this country, and the children, because the Cancer in the 5th house in the USA solar return.
Yeah, here I'll drop. Of course, there's other. Yeah, I'll stop sharing at the moment and go back to you. Something high, because all I can see was that. It is fascinating. I know that for the Sabian symbol of the sun, it's an old man, but that was at 14. So I didn't look at the 13 one because I rounded it off. I think that's so important to realize, to look at both these numbers. And if you look at
it
one
talks
and
about character growth and wisdom.
yeah,
and character
because
growth.
there's the shadow side, and then there's the elevated side, you could say,
Absolutely.
because shadow, we just have to get through those shadows, understand what they are, until we can see more light and then rise to it. But it had to do a lot about purpose, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's funny too that you mentioned rise, because when we look at the nodes, as we know, the Ketu, the South Node from Vedic astrology perspective, in the USA solar return chart, it's conjunct the midheaven, and the North Node, which is Rahu, is conjunct the IC in Gemini, and the Sabian symbols actually for the USA solar return on the nodes speak to forced growth at this particular point in our lives, forced growth. And the North Node in Gemini is talking about mind versus matter and new beginnings and rising to the occasion. So, and of course, there's this whole discussion about the whole that Sag being on the ascendant, and now it's on the midheaven. That there's sort of this need for freedom. That's sort of a catchword that's always been within the collective of the people that started this country as rebels, and always needing that freedom. And so I guarantee you, because the USA's Pluto's in Capricorn, 248 years from now or so, we're going to go through another revolution. It's just the nature of the nation, of the people that started this country. And I should note also for people that the exact Pluto return is this coming February. And February is the exact degree Pluto return.
Yeah, it's not far away, actually. And of course, we're feeling all the tremors of its purging, transformational, dumping what isn't working, really not giving us, feeding us to like, okay, don't know if I want to be a veg. Yeah, a whole nother concept. It's really true.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the whole numbers too, because like just looking at, well, here we have a few minutes, and just to remind people, I am listening, not just, we are listening with Justin Crockett Elzie. That's Elzie. And you can find him and this 4-month class coming up on September 6th, right around the beginning of the next season, where you can learn about what we're talking about, a hands-on, and clue into your own thinking. And isn't that what we're all wanting to do? We want to get authentic and try to understand, so that we're not always delineating it through a third party. It's like, let's just get one-to-one on this and have his class. And so if you go to Talk Cosmos, you can find Justin. If you lose it all, like, oh, I didn't have paper at the moment, I can't write it down. Otherwise, we'll have a spot coming up, so you can subscribe to YouTube, Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. But it's been a wonderful conversation about numbers, astrology, Sabian symbols, and the chart. I'll hand it to you if you have something, because just looking at numbers, not just as one whole, but how they are made up, and also realizing that it's a cycle. Do you have thoughts that you want to share?
I just want to encourage Western astrologers to really openly embrace and really check out the numbers in numerology. It'll add depth to your practice.
Like today is 4. Okay, so today we've been working on platform. I mean, foundations is like, what are we looking at? What is the truth of this? Yes. But then it's 7. So
that's knowledge foundation. That's the structure and foundation of knowledge.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of 2s in this year too. So I guess we can't do it alone, huh?
Well, the USA is in its 7 years. So this is the year of analysis and fixing things. It's a very Virgo number.
Thank you, Justin. All right. Well, blessings to everybody. Happy, not New Year, but 4th of July. Okay. I'll see you
Thank you for
again.
joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.